Our guest tonight is the Melbourne Football Club's National Recruiting Manager, Jason Taylor, who has just completed his 8th draft for the Demons. Jason, thanks for giving up your time to join us once again on the Demonland podcast.
It's a pleasure. No worries, Andy.
JC, can you take us through the 3 picks, Jake Bowie, Bailey Laurie and Fraser Rossman from this year's draft, and what positions and roles you see them playing for the MFC?
Yeah, well, we went into this draft as the year unfolded that we thought that there was a really good variety of player and we would target a group of players. So in players that, as I've been on record stating that, we just wanted to bring in really good decision makers, really good ball users, high footy IQ, and also we wanted to bring in some run. So, on the other wings, Ed Langdon. So we feel we were able to achieve all that. So with Jake, we're actually going to start him back. He's played a little bit of footy back. He's played a fair bit of footy on the wing. He's played footy forward. But he has played a little bit of footy back where he looks really good with his run and his decision making, and he does open up the field with his foot skills. And Bailey will initially start forward, very creative player, either side of the body, very good finisher on goal, but he does have some scope down the track to go through the midfield. Just great spatial awareness, so he's just able to not only evade himself, but he'll put teammates into good spots. And with Fraser, I was able to see Fraser a couple of times over the pre-season before COVID hit, and he played a little bit forward in those practice games and also on the wing. I think he had about 13 shots at goal in those 2 games, just with his ability to run and his speed and his aerial prowess. So we just thought that he might be a player that could really develop over time with his athletic profile as that taller winger, and that's where he'll start with his training with the group.
Are any of these guys sort of ready to play round 1? And if not, do you expect to see any of them play in 2021?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. We don't go into any draft period really thinking that they need to play immediately. We think the list is in a good enough spot, but that's not required. But that's up to their progress and how quickly they come on. They've only had 2 training sessions, but they've slotted in pretty well, and that remains to be seen, to be honest.
Jason, it was a pretty extraordinary year as a result of COVID. How did you and the recruiting team go about assessing the Victorian prospects, given the circumstances?
Yeah, so obviously we've seen them through 16s and their bottom age years, and also pre-season. Fortunate enough to get around to a few practice games, prior to COVID hitting, and that not only gave you a bit more of an insight into the growth of, the more established players, but it also gave you a look at players that, might come on that you earmark from that pre-season games to watch throughout the year. So we had a bit of a first look at some of those guys, and then we just had a mountain of vision to go through, and then it was about bringing in more vision from their school football and anything we could source really, and then it's just about going over that. So it was a long year really, and working through reference checks, and then we're fortunate enough to see them in a combine as well. But along with all that, the South Australian and West Australian footy got going eventually, and we were able to watch live stream of that over the weekends, which was really useful. And we just assessed as we normally would. I think we've got an experienced enough team, with myself and Kelly O'Donnell and Darren Ferrugia, who actually have been made redundant through the COVID. And Todd Patterson did some work on the futures for us, and also Tim Lamb. So with that experience, I think that, it's not an issue to assess players when you're doing it off vision as well. I think if you're less experienced, it'd be more difficult. Obviously, a live viewing's more beneficial, but that's what we had to work with, and that's what we did. So, I went to a couple of country games mid-year when it opened up, and then it closed down pretty quickly again. So I was able to see a little bit of that footy as well.
The three draftees, they're all Victorians who obviously were unable to play, like you said, in the NAB Cup this year. Was this a strategy to pick Victorian prospects ahead of players from South Australia and WA who had exposed form?
No, not at all. We assessed everyone on their merits and put them in an order as we normally would. I introduced the boys to the playing group and the staff on Monday, and I spoke about, what you learn a little bit out of COVID. We all do, and it's about putting your best foot forward at each opportunity you have, and representing yourself well and with purpose. Each occasion you get to do that. And I spoke, about 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗲, how he's always been a consistent player, and he was able to put on a really good performance at the MCG on grand final day. Not knowing, none of these boys not knowing that next year will be ripped off him. And same with Bailey Laurie in the final series last year. He's consistent throughout, but his final series was really, really promising. And in Fraser's case, to see his growth from last year to this year over the pre-season was, unbelievable, really. And the only other opportunity he got to impress was through the combine, which, I think he missed the record by 1 second, and it was later smashed by Harry Sharp. But, he just the way he presented himself and the work he put in, they're the type of things that you can put your best foot forward on each occasion you get, and, you can get rewarded.
You mentioned some redundancies. How was the soft cap reduction? How is that going to affect the recruiting team sort of going forward?
Yeah, well, we've been able to maintain Kelly O'Donnell in a part-time role, but then it's basically just down. So Tim Lamb, obviously, list manager, looking after that side of it, and I'll be just looking after the drafts with some support from Todd Patterson, who remains in his position, looking after the academies as far as, NGA until we don't know how long we'll run for, and then obviously Father Sons, but he's obviously the AFLW list manager as well. So it'll be different. Been able to keep our South Australian manager Dave Odie and West Australian manager Devon Martin and a young fella Cameron Allen over there, but all the Victorian part-timers have had to be let go as well. So it's a different landscape. It's not unfamiliar, I suppose, when I first started. But it's been a tough year on that front, and quite sad, some of the great people that have been lost to the game in the interim.
Jason, can you just take us behind the rationale of trading picks, something that we're quite actively doing over a few seasons, and this year essentially, picking up 2 early second-round picks in what some are viewing as a compromise draft, as opposed to next year being, reportedly a very strong crop. What's the thinking behind that, and is it just a smart tactic to keep trading away the future and sorting out the present and leaving that for the next year?
Yeah, well, there's a bit of that. Although they were 2 late first-round picks, so it's regardless of academy players jumping in, and we like the variety of player. Like next year's a reasonable draft as well. Like every draft's pretty good, I reckon. But it's also a lot of midfielders next year. So we just like the variety of a group of players that we thought that if we could get 3 of those, that would be a good result for us. And like you say, next year is next year, and a lot of water goes under the bridge. And we just saw it as a good opportunity to get in, and we traded away. I know we did it the year before, but we ended up turning that into 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀 and Trent Rivers. And this year we've been able to bring in 2 first-rounders for 1, albeit at the back end of the first round. So, it's just about getting the players in, and that group of players, as I said, that we thought could help us.
There was speculation in the lead up to the draft that had us right into Max Holmes. How serious was that interest, and was there a reaction when Geelong made the trade to bring him in and perhaps, pinching him from us?
No, not at all. I think that all gets a bit overstated as far as media and, as I said, we had a group of players. We've done our work on, an enormous amount of players, really. And we had some interest in Max at some point. It was more probably focused around that third selection. But he was in a group of players, and there was other players that we, may have had in front of Max that went before our selections as well. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. It certainly wasn't about that. A lot of clubs had interest in not only Max but other players. So it's just the nature of the actual system, to be honest.
Another one, perhaps in the same category, Jack Carroll, who was speculated to go in the top 20 and then slid to pick 41.
Yeah, I think that if you find doing your research, there's probably players like Jack that slide, every year. Yeah. And maybe they haven't slid. Maybe it's been reported that, we did a lot of work on Jack. He played well on grand final day also last year and had a pretty strong culture year. So, again, he was in a group of players that was, that was around that mark for us, but it was, it's just you have an order and you stick to it.
We have 2 remaining list spots available to us. Can you give us any scoops there? Have we asked any prospects to train with us over the pre-season?
Not as yet, no. Deacon Smith, who's a next generation academy boy, he'll train with us. They can't start training with us until post the Christmas break.
Jason, you talked before about this year's group of players being very good decision makers and providing a bit of run and skill. In a broad sense, and I know we've asked you this question before, but is drafting about taking the best available regardless of the position, or is it about identifying deficiencies and needs and picking players that fill those?
I think it's a bit of both. I think you just can't keep bringing in the same type. You are looking to, bring in players that complement your current group. And that's probably what there's, if you look at the last 2 years, being able to bring in 6 players in 32 or whatever, we've been able to, there's been a bit of best available with that. We felt Luke Jackson was best available. And then there's also been some fill some needs through those selections. So it is a little bit of both. But, you're not going to overlook a player that you think can be a genuine superstar just for needs.
What's the latest on prospective father-son prospects for the Ds? I believe 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗰 nominated for the draft this year but wasn't picked up. What's the latest on Kobe? And I'm sure you're keeping a close eye on Kalani White, who is almost as tall as his old man now.
Yeah, there's a few boys coming through in there, but they're still only around that 14, 15 year-old range. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀, he'll come over and train with us as well. Sorry, but he's not until next year's draft. So that's just a common practice we would do, like with next generation academy players. Kobe's over here visiting his father at the moment, so we're in conversations just considering whether we give him that opportunity as well. But we just haven't finalised anything on that yet.
Just a couple more for you, Jason, and extremely grateful for your time. The Ben Brown trade seemed to come out of the blue for many supporters. When did the club become aware that snagging someone of Ben's talents was a possibility? And what do you make of the disparity in what he cost to our club and the cost of Jeremy Cameron, given their very similar stats and profile over recent years?
Yeah, well, they are similar in that sense. We just saw an opportunity with Ben, like as far as we think he can straighten us up a little bit there and assist Sam and Luke. So we saw that as a good opportunity when it arose to to then get involved in that. And Tim Lamb did a fantastic job in making initial contact with Ben and then going from there. But we thought, I'm not here to speak with other clubs and their deals and things like that, but it's, we thought that was a fair and reasonable deal for both parties. And, and that's how you go into the trade period, and that's the outcomes you look for.
In regards to our recruits over the past few years, we haven't had the chance to see many of them in action due to injuries. There's 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘁𝗲, who went down last year with his second ACL injury in the pre-season. Harry Petty missed the entire year through injury, and not having a proper seconds competition last year made it difficult for Sparrow and Jordan, the latter suffering an injury on the cusp of selection. How do you see their development and tracking?
Yeah, well, obviously Tommy made some real strides last year, Tommy Sparrow, before injury. So we're really pleased with how it's done. For pre-season, he's in really good condition. He's put on a lot of size. He's training very well. James and Jordan the same. Yeah, James, I mean, the year really affected those boys. What I will say about that group is that, their dedication's unbelievable, really. For young players, they set a fantastic example about consistency in their habits. And James, the same as Tom, has come back really well, and he's running really well. He's put on some good size, and it's just about opportunity. I mean, you can't fit 28, 30 into 22. Yeah. That's just the reality of it. And you need good young players underneath to develop. And I think he was very close, James. He didn't put a foot wrong all year, but that set up of the competition made it difficult, and then he got injured, unfortunately, at the wrong time. Harry, he just had those groin issues, which was disappointing, but he's back now, and he's training, and he's training with the defenders, where he started his career, and we've got really high hopes for Harry. And Aaron, well, it's well documented that he's had the 2 knee injuries, which is just unfortunate, but he's back in training, and he's training very well. He's just a player that, when you watch training and all drills, and he just finds the footy. So he'll be training, as a winger, and he can really cover the ground, and fingers crossed that he gets a run at it.
A lot of promise from the class of 2019. Plenty of exciting signs from Jackson, 𝗍𝗲, and Rivers. What's it like for you watching them play their first games and making their debut? It's probably like you must feel like a parent in some ways, watching a child go onto the field for the first time. Take us through that, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, you always. I'm not nervous on draft night. I'm more nervous when they get going, I suppose. And you watch how they progress. But I was just thrilled that. I thought they were, all 3 of them were able to really impact in what was a tricky year. So, unfortunately, when Luke hurt his hamstring, I thought that really affected us a little bit. He was really starting to improve every game. And, I think 𝗍𝗲, on all the measurements, if you like, had a really good first year for a small forward. Just probably need to be a little bit more accurate on goal, but if he had been, it would have been an outstanding year. And we all saw how Rivers finished off the year, so that was really pleasing. They all showed a competitive spirit. The way they've come back's been strong as well. Like just looking at Luke Jackson the other day, it was unbelievable the size he's put on, and he just looks like an imposing figure, really. So. Got really strong hopes that they can continue their development into 2021.
You must have been really rapt with when Trent Rivers kicked that sealer late in the season.
I was pleased that I thought in a few of those latter games he showed a real competitive spirit to want to win. And the more we've got doing that, the better off we're going to be. And that was the most pleasing aspect of that.
Jason, we want to thank you once again for your time. It's always great chatting with you post-draft and just getting a little bit of insight into sort of what goes into picking these stars of the future for the D. So thank you very much for your time once again.
Yeah, no worries, Andy. Jason, cheers.
Thank you.